This morning from where we're watching, but hold on, sir. We did an icebreaker because the
Excellency, our leader, Mr. Peter B. Welcome, sir. Excellency, Ambassador, distinguished senators, our chair, the great chair, Senator Nadisma, you're welcome. My leader, the coordinator of the obedient movement, my comrade, I think several distinguished. So let me say, honorable members, senators, everybody, the rep of His Excellency the Governor, my friend Chinas, I welcome. All protocols observed at this point. I'll be very brief. So I have two basic statements to make. And the first statement is that Nigeria's survival depends and derives from a successful revolution defined by two basic ideas. The first is the idea of democratic citizenship, and the second is the idea of democratic developmentalism. The second statement I will make in this speech is that Mr. Peter Obi possesses the best profile, pedigree, personality, and passion to lead this desirable and desired revolution. Now, let me start these two theses. I start with the problem. What is the problem with Nigeria? Oftentimes, we start solving problems without first understanding those problems. Both in politics, in economy, in every aspect of human endeavor. One of the biggest tragedies is to commence with earnest intensity to solve either a non-existing problem or a poorly understood problem. This is not theoretical. One of the leading reformers after the collapse of USSR, Geoffrey Sachs, did a great job with social economies in East Europe and others. And finally, he adopted a shock therapy. We have to be bold, solve the problem, reform everywhere. Finally, in his book, The End of Poverty, he came to a conclusion that the failure of those efforts, because unlike doctors, that economists did not borrow from clinical medicine, where you proceed from differential diagnosis. You try to, if somebody comes, a child has fever, they don't look at one symptom and say, this is a fever, give him aspirin. They do differential diagnosis. They also map that sickness within the morbidity of the family. And so I would like to try to diagnose properly the Nigerian problem. So I start by saying that two statements. One, that Nigeria is failing. Nobody doubts that. Two, Nigeria is contradicted. So the failure is reinforced by the contradiction. Now, what are if we did any evidence of Nigerian failure? I think in 1964, thereabout, a leading developmental economist, Dudley Sear, gave us a framework, and Mr. Peter B. has been very clear in his statements on that framework. He says, how do we assess whether a country is economically developing? He says there are only three indicators. First, what is happening to poverty? Second, what's happening to unemployment? Third, what's happening to inequality? Then if you like, you can look at what's happening to gross GDP per capita. But these three are the most important thing. So if you look at, without wasting time, clearly, Nigeria is failing and failing woefully. By 2019, we were described as the largest poverty nation. The World Poverty Clock showed that we were the largest collection of poor people. But beyond that, if you look at the World Poverty Clock, you see something. Every minute, second, people are living or running into poverty. So it's like they have a figure. You see people running out of poverty, showing how many people are escaping from poverty in those countries. They see people running into poverty. Interestingly, Ethiopia and Nigeria were very poor. But Ethiopia has more people running away from poverty. Nigeria had more people running into poverty. So it's not that we are poor. We are getting poorer in almost geometrical proportion. So, for example, by the official NBS statistics, by 2019 and 2020, the poor, very poor people in Nigeria were about 45%, 42, 45. Today, it's about 56% and growing. It's expected that this year alone, about 20 million, up to 20 million people will get into poverty. Now, if you look at the non-income measure, look at deprivation, vulnerability, access to basic needs. At least in 2019, about 154 million people don't have the barest facility for the barest existence. Now, it's not just that Nigeria is poor. Nigerians are getting poorer. It's that the prospect of Nigerians being less poor diminishes every day. If you look at our debt to GDP, it may look comfortable, but look at our debt to revenue and debt servicing. How much we are using. This government claims to have driven it down from 70-something% to about 60-something%. But if you're using 60-something% of your earning, and your earning is diminishing, and your population is growing to service just debt. So if you add the new wave of debts that we're going to incur, we might get back to 99% debt servicing. So what's the point? The point is that we're not just poor. We are increasingly not having resources to even escape poverty. Now, if you look at unemployment, the federal government rebased, changed the methodology and got us to about 4.something%. But everybody knows that the definition of poverty today is that if you are working for 2 hours, if you're a cab driver, Uber driver, 2 hours, you are working, which is laughable. Now, the point is that unemployment is a big problem. Now, look at inequality. Gini coefficient inequality were very high. But the key point I want to leave us today is a data that shows that even by 1999 to 1994, from that time, Nigeria and Taiwan, Nigeria was generating about 8,500 megawatts, 3,500 megawatts daily. Taiwan was doing about 8,500 megawatts. Today, they're doing 30-something thousand, and we are still at 4,000. If we are generous, sometimes 3,500. Now, this is a story around stagnation and decline. Now, if you look at macroeconomic factors, they are more terrible. If you look at fragility index globally, which means that Nigeria is not just poor, Nigeria is very fragile. Nigeria is one of the most fragile nations in the world. Today, if you look at innovation, I looked at the latest 2024 Innovation Index by the World WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization. Togo, Niger, all West African countries are scoring higher than Nigeria in both innovation and infrastructure index. So this is a case of real failure. Now, failure is not a problem too much. What's a problem? It's actually that your design does not enable you escape failure. So Nigeria has a bigger problem, which I call the fact that Nigeria is contradicted. There is a contradiction in the Nigerian system. Now, I just want to mention quickly before I get to what this means for revolution. Nigeria has a nationality problem. The key challenge for Nigeria has been, how do we describe a Nigerian? How do we describe ourselves as a nation state? The history of economic and social development in the world tells us that it starts with a national economy. A nation, it must be a nation. And a nation is defined not by basically geography. It's a narrative, it's a construct around oneness, common identity, law, and social norms. So we have a crisis of nationality. We have a crisis of state and religion. This is critical. And these crises are foundational. These are crises that we have refused to transcend because of leadership failure. So today, we are gathered here on the obedient family as one people, one Nigerian nation. But outside here, our government continues to see us more as ethnic and religious differences. People are different. That's a crisis